I'm Chuck Stout, curator at the Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum. In this episode, we're going to go behind the wings with some of the first black aviators in the U.S. military, the Tuskegee Airmen. This one's going to be cool. We're going to take a look at the North American F86 Sabre, and we're going to take a look at the F102 Delta Dagger. To make this episode even more special, today we have one of the few surviving Tuskegee Airmen. But before we get to Colonel Harvey, let's talk a little bit about the history that made the Tuskegee Airmen the legend that they are today. The Tuskegee Airmen were an experiment by the U.S. Army Air Corps to determine whether black pilots could handle military flying. It turns out they could, but the Tuskegee Airmen fought a second battle, one against racial discrimination. Successful applicants for the Tuskegee experiment had to have at least 2 years of college, and most were already licensed civilian pilots at a time when the Air Corps was teaching white teenagers to fly right out of high school.
Nice going, Bob. You've got a right to be happy.
With an impressive combat record and war accomplishments, the success of the Tuskegee Airmen helped influence then-President Harry Truman's decision to desegregate the armed forces in 1948.
1508.
I asked the Congress for a civil rights bill, and I demanded the integration of the armed forces.
The United States Congress decided that we should try and see if it was true that black people could not fly. From the beginning, the experiment was set up so that the Tuskegee experiment would fail. In 1925, there had been a study published that stated that black people were incapable of being combat pilots. They couldn't fly airplanes, they didn't have the strength of character to be combat pilots under stress and pressure. And the Tuskegee experiment was basically to find out if that was true. They succeeded beyond everybody's expectations, but it still didn't have a lot of support. And then First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt came and visited the Tuskegee airfield, and she flew with a black instructor pilot, Chief Anderson, and when they landed, she said, "Looks like black pilots can fly all right to me." So after the endorsement of the First Lady, the Tuskegee Airmen started gaining some traction. And by the end of the war, they had trained almost 1,000 people. And we're lucky enough to have one of them here with us today, Colonel James Harvey III. Thank you for being with us this morning, Colonel Harvey.
Thank you, it's good to be here. Actually, it's good to be any place.
So tell me how the first black Americans became pilots in the U.S. military.
Well, that wasn't an easy job. Everything was stacked against us. We didn't have the ability to fly aircraft or operate heavy equipment. We were inferior to the white man. We were nothing. We overcame all that Mickey Mouse stuff, and we proved in the end that we were the best. We were better than they were.
So what first sparked your interest in aviation?
I was standing in my yard one day in a little town northeastern Pennsylvania called New Gold Station. And I heard this noise, and I looked up, and there was a flight of P-40s flying in formation. And I said to myself, I can do that. I'd like to do that one day. And that was it.
So can you tell me a little bit about what happened when you first tried to enlist in the Army Air Corps?
When I arrived in Washington, D.C., and told to ride in the car where Negroes ride. Well, welcome to the South. So this is new for me now. So I'll have to adjust. And I adjusted. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. If I didn't, well, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
So how did you manage to get into the flight training program?
When I finished my 30 days of basic training, they put me in the Army Air Corps Engineers, driving bulldozers, graders, carryalls. My mission was to go into the jungles in the Pacific, doze out an area and build an airfield. I said, this isn't for me. So I applied for cadet training. There were 10 of us that took the exam, 9 whites and myself. When the dust cleared, 2 of us had passed. And from there, I was sent to Keesler Field in Biloxi, Mississippi, for 30 days of basic training. When I finished my basic training, my 30 days, off to Tuskegee I went, and the rest is history.
Obviously, there's a lot more to flight training than just stick and rudder skills. Was the academic part difficult?
But I was a perfectionist, and perfectionists, they can do anything. Give them the problem, they'll solve it. So there's no problem for a perfectionist.
That is a great message for our audience to hear. Can you tell me what primary flight training was like at Tuskegee?
Yes, our primary instructors were graduates of the Tuskegee Institute Flying School, and they were people of color, just like me. Their job was to not only teach us to fly, but teach us how to react to our white instructors who would be taking over in basic and advanced. They would get in our face, call us all kinds of names, the names that the white instructors would be calling us. They taught us to fly, and then they adjusted our attitudes.
I understand that after World War II, you continued to fly for the Air Corps and then the Air Force, and ended up flying the F86 Sabre jet. We've got one right here. Let's take a closer look. The North American F86 Sabre, sometimes called the Sabre jet, is a transonic airplane. The Sabre is best known as America's first swept-wing jet fighter. It was able to counter the Soviet MiG-15, which was their first swept-wing jet fighter, in the skies over Korea. What do you remember about flying the F-86?
The F-86A had automatic slats on the wings, and the slower your speed, the more the slats come out to give you more lift. The only bad part about automatic slats are the rollers get a little dirty, and if the ground crew doesn't keep the rollers clean, you can go into a tight turn, one will come out and one won't. You could go into a spin. If you weren't a Tuskegee Airman, because we fly with our feet on the rudders.
My understanding is that in addition to flying this thing, you were also a flight leader.
I was a flight commander, assistant operations officer, and test pilot. So I had pretty good jobs.
So there's a big difference between flying a transonic or subsonic jet like this one and going supersonic. Let's go take a look at the F-102. The Convair F-102 was a supersonic interceptor that played a significant part in the Cold War. Besides being the first American airplane to have a delta wing, the F-102 prototype was intended to be supersonic, but it couldn't break the sound barrier as it was originally designed. The area rule developed by Richard Whitcomb was what allowed it to become supersonic, increasing its speed by about 40%. Here we are at the F-102. What was it like to fly it?
Oh, there's no comparison. Fighter pilots like speed, and this aircraft would go supersonic on the deck. I know when I checked out in Newfoundland, in the wintertime, we'd get down on the deck about 500 feet, go supersonic and just ripple the snow. It's the first all-weather interceptor that the Air Force had in its inventory.
From being denied enlistment in 1943 to rising to colonel in the Air Force, you've had a really interesting career. What stands out to you?
Well, there's only one thing that stands out, really stands out, and that's winning the weapons meet that we were not supposed to win. They were going to award 2 trophies in that contest, one for high individual and one for high group. They didn't want to see us take everything, because after all, who are we? We were the best, that's what we were. But anyway, they had to cheat to do it.
In 1949, Colonel Harvey and his team of Tuskegee Airmen won the first Top Gun competition. It was held at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada and was a competition among all the squadrons of the U.S. Air Force. Even though they won the competition, the winners were listed as unknown for decades. In January 22, a ceremony was held at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, which was the site of the original Top Gun competition. They commemorated this more than 70 years after that competition, but from this day forward, the Tuskegee Airmen will be recognized as the winners of that competition.
1949, the event we're here to recognize today, they did the initial Air Force Worldwide Fighter Competition. 332nd Fighter Squadron, the Tuskegee Airmen Squadron, came here, and not only did they compete, but they won.
Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a step in the right direction. It's been a long time coming, but it's here. It's here.
What does it mean to you to be a Tuskegee Airman?
It was supposed to have failed. Well, we didn't let it fail. We just keep proving we're good. We just keep proving it over and over again we're good. And we're finally getting acceptance, finally. Years late, but we're finally getting it.
Well, you've opened the door for thousands of people of color.
Yes.
Not just in aviation, but in all walks of life.
Yes. The forerunners of integration. But we didn't look at it that way. We just looked at doing our job, doing it to the best of our ability.
So what would be your message to the next generation, people growing up now?
Aim to be the best. Shut the TV off, go to school, learn, pay attention, and aim for perfection. If you aim for perfection, you will end up being the best.
Well, thank you very much for coming down and visiting with us. This is one of the Behind the Wings episodes that we will treasure. I really appreciate you being here, and I wish you the very best in the future.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I have a long way to go yet.
So that wraps up this episode of Behind the Wings. So if you liked it, subscribe, like, and give us your comments. That way we can make more. Now I got to get back to work.